Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking the story of one of the most fascinating corporate evolutions in modern history. We're looking at a company that started out as a 19th century single doctor startup and just morphed. Through constant, deliberate reinvention, they became a global healthcare titan whose products you literally probably have sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. It's an absolute masterclass in strategic pivoting, portfolio diversification, and building a business model that is virtually bulletproof.
But to truly appreciate where this company is today, we have to rewind all the way back to 1888. Imagine this, a 30-year-old practicing physician and drugstore owner in Chicago named Dr. Wallace C. Abbott has a brilliant idea. He takes the active part of medicinal plants, the alkaloids, and forms them into these tiny, accurately dosed pills called dosimetric granules. At the time, this was a massive leap forward for patient safety. But his very first year of sales, they amounted to a grand total of $2,000.
Now, I want you to compare that humble beginning to this staggering figure. Today, Abbott Laboratories pulls in over $40 billion in annual revenue. That's a lot of dosimetric granules. They operate in more than 160 countries worldwide. They have completely transformed from a local apothecary selling plant extracts to a wildly diversified conglomerate that commands top-tier market share in medical devices, diagnostics, nutrition, and pharmaceuticals. It is an incredible contrast, and today we are going to dissect exactly how they built this empire.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. 1. Origins to global giant. 2. The great AbbVie split. 3. The 4 business pillars. 4. The recurring revenue engine. And finally, 5. Future growth and challenges.
Section 1. Origins to global giant. 125 years of innovation.
Look, you don't survive for over 130 years in the healthcare sector without a serious legacy of continuous medical breakthroughs. Abbott's whole evolution is defined by constantly jumping into the next frontier of medicine. After their founding in 1888, they became pioneers in anesthetics by the 1930s with drugs like Nembutal and Pentothal. Fast forward to 1946, and they're the first pharma company to set up a dedicated lab for radiopharmaceuticals, which basically laid the groundwork for their massive diagnostics business today. In 1985, they quite literally changed the world by launching the very first FDA-approved blood test to detect HIV antibodies. And then, in 2002, they secured approval for Humira, a rheumatoid arthritis drug that would eventually become their most successful product ever. They didn't just ride the trends, they repeatedly created them.
Section 2. The Great AbbVie Split, the Ultimate Pivot.
This brings us to the early 2010s, and what is arguably the single most transformative action in the company's entire history. Abbott had a fascinating problem on its hands. On one side, they had a highly profitable, massive research-based pharmaceutical division, driven largely by the blockbuster success of Humira. On the other side, they had a vast, diversified medical products business. So in 2013, they did something incredibly bold. They split the company right down the middle. They spun off the high-risk, high-reward research-based biopharmaceuticals into a brand new independent company called AbbVie. Basically, they separated their high-risk wildcard bets from their steady, reliable cash cows. That left the new Abbott perfectly streamlined to focus entirely on diversified medical products. Think devices, diagnostics, and nutrition.
Former CEO Miles White summarized the stakes perfectly at the time when he said, Abbott has taken the most transformative action in its 125-year history, reinventing ourselves for changing times. This wasn't some desperate last-ditch effort to save a failing business. No, this was a highly deliberate, calculated reinvention designed to make sure both sides of the business could thrive without constraining each other.
Section 3. The 4 business pillars, a diversified empire.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly balanced the modern new Abbott portfolio really is. They don't have to sweat relying on a single blockbuster product anymore. They operate across 4 primary, equally sized segments. First, medical devices. This is their largest segment, featuring massive hits like the Freestyle Libre continuous glucose monitor. Second is diagnostic products, anchored by their high-tech Alinity systems. Third, nutritional products. This is where you'll find household consumer brands you definitely know, like Similac, Ensure, and Pedialyte. And fourth, established pharmaceuticals, providing branded generic drugs primarily in emerging markets. This brilliant structure prevents the company from being vulnerable to a sudden patent cliff or a single market crash. It balances risk and reward beautifully.
And the crazy thing is, this diversification isn't just in the products they sell, it's in where they sell them. Get this, only 30% of their revenue comes from the US. Another 30% comes from other developed nations like Western Europe, Canada, and Japan. But a massive 40% of their revenue is generated in emerging markets, places like India, China, and Latin America, are acting as these massive growth engines, particularly for their established pharma and nutrition segments. It's the ultimate buffer against localized economic shocks.
Section 4, the recurring revenue engine, stability across cycles.
So, what does this all mean for their bottom line? Well, let me ask you, how do you guarantee cash flow in healthcare? It's the ultimate multi-billion-dollar question, right? With shifting hospital budgets, intense regulatory hurdles, and totally unpredictable economic cycles, how do you make sure the money just keeps coming in month after month?
The secret is a recurring revenue model. Think of it like the classic razor and blade strategy, but applied to high-tech medical science. Abbott's entire business model is fundamentally built around repeat usage. They don't just want to sell a hospital a huge piece of capital equipment once and then walk away forever. Nope. They want to sell a platform that requires the customer to continually buy the consumables that make that platform work.
Let's look at how this actually plays out in the real world. With Freestyle Libre, a diabetic patient doesn't just buy a glucose monitor once. They have to replace those wearable sensors every couple of weeks. Over in Diagnostics, a hospital buys the Alinity instrument once, sure, but they have to buy the testing reagents and cartridges every single day to run it. There are nutrition brands like Ensure and Similac. Those are literal consumer staples that people buy repeatedly at the pharmacy. And their established pharmaceuticals run on standard prescription refills. These consumable products guarantee a steady, hyper-predictable cash flow. This is exactly what makes the modern Abbott model so incredibly resilient against economic downturns, especially compared to companies that rely purely on one-time surgical purchases. Section 5. Future Growth and Challenges. Navigating the Complexities. Now, we have to talk about the risks, because operating at this kind of massive scale isn't always smooth sailing. High-volume manufacturing of highly regulated health products carries immense vulnerability. Just look at the 2022 Sturgis infant formula plant shutdown and recall. That single event proved that even a $40 billion behemoth can stumble hard when it comes to manufacturing and quality control. A facility issue literally disrupted the entire U.S. infant formula supply chain, taking a huge toll on Abbott's nutrition segment. It was a stark reminder that maintaining absolute trust in consumer health products requires flawless, continuous execution. But despite those real-world operational risks, Abbott knows exactly where it's heading next. Their roadmap for growth is super targeted. They are aggressively pushing for even broader adoption of the Freestyle Libre platform, moving way beyond just intensive insulin users and tapping into the massive type 2 diabetes and general wellness markets. They're also heavily investing in connected cardiac monitoring, blending implantable devices with real-time remote data. They're hyper-focused on maximizing the daily productivity of all those diagnostic instruments they've already installed in hospitals. And of course, they are working hard to capture the rising, long-term healthcare demand in expanding emerging economies. Think about it. They've managed to completely reinvent themselves from a $2,000 apothecary startup into a $40 billion global titan over the last century. That is no small feat. But navigating this next era of connected, globalized healthcare, that's going to be their ultimate test. Can Abbott maintain its cutting-edge innovation edge while balancing the immense regulatory, manufacturing, and supply chain burdens of such a highly diversified global portfolio? I guess we'll have to watch and see. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.